collecting the different elements. Ginger has a message to give to Joy. So.
Leave your tablet alone and get up here.
She's looking for ink.
Oh, we need a pen. Okay, well, that would put River in charge of. I got a message for you while
Let's let her give her message.
the team was singing. And God said to tell you that you have a very special calling on your life. He knows what you are going through. This is a hard time, and everybody that's sitting here who's older than Joy knows the teenage years are very difficult. But as that video just showed, he went through a lot more for us than we're going through for him. And he wants you to know he's going to be with you every step of the way. And he didn't tell me what your calling was, but you have a very special calling on your life. And he wanted me to say that in front of both of you. And he wanted me to say it in front of the whole church, because when we have children in the church, we're all responsible for any problems they might have. If they come to you, then you need to help them. And that goes for any of the children that are in the church. And we're all God's children.
Amen. It takes a village.
It takes a village, that's right. So, okay? And I'm supposed to give you a hug. And I like to give hugs because they give good hugs. Stepped over to stay, yeah.
I think the first Sunday of the month is probably the best one. We get to take communion together. Well, my message this morning is looking for love in all the wrong places.
Say it again.
Looking for love in all the wrong places. It's February. It's the love month. Valentine's Day is just a week or so away. Happy Valentine's Day early.
I don't know nothing about Valentine's Day, but it's Jill's birthday.
It's Jill's birthday and
February
she's
14th.
flying to a conference.
Yes.
So we will miss her, and hopefully she'll be back very quickly and we can love on her. Now, I've got numerous verses in today's reading. They're all applicable to my message today. As a matter of fact, these are the answers to the question. And we'll get into the questions in just a minute. So these are the answers. So I'm giving you the answers before we take the test. So let's read these scriptures together. And I want you to remember what we're reading as I give and share the message today, and how each one of these fits in and where it fits in to the message. So join me as we first begin to read Proverbs 11:22. It says, "A beautiful woman who lacks discretion is like a gold ring in a pig's snout."
Nobody's reading. Come on, y'all, get into it.
A beautiful woman
Woman
lacks discretion
is like a gold ring in a pig's snout. I
Thank
don't know if you can make a pig beautiful, but he's still a pig. 1 John 2:16. "For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world." We're going to see that today. That's one of the answers. 2 Corinthians 6 verses 14 through 15. "Don't team up with those who are unbelievers. How can righteousness be a partner with wickedness? How can light live with darkness? What harmony can there be between Christ and the devil? How can a believer be a partner with an unbeliever?" We're going to see that today. In finally, 1 Corinthians 13, verses 4 through 7. This is the love month. Let's read it together. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love does not envy. It is not boastful. It is not conceited. Does not act improperly. Is not selfish. Is not provoked. And does not keep a record of wrongs. Love finds no joy in unrighteousness, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Now I'm going to be sharing the story, part of the story of Samson today. This is a crazy story. I'm not going to show any verses on the screen. I want you to read it out of the Bibles today. We're going to be looking at the New Living Translation. So if you've got the blue Bible, you'll be able to follow along with me. If you've got your own, you'll see probably the wording's a little bit differently, but it's the same message. If it's been a while since you read about Samson, he's in the book of Judges, chapters 13, 14, 15, and 16. Quite a story. We're not going to read the whole thing, but we're just going to read little clips of it. Little clips that you probably have forgotten about, and you're going to go, I cannot believe that's in the Bible. So we're going to focus on the story of Samson and Delilah. Delilah. The story has been inspiration for Hollywood movies for years. You know, it's a story of passion and violence and drama and action. You know, all the things that make for a big box office hit. But the story of Samson is also one of the stories of failure in the Bible. It's the story of downfall. So we're going to look at that downfall. Why? What was the root behind the downfall? It's the story of a man who was blessed with tremendous strength, and he totally wastes his gift. He wastes his gift of strength because of pride and lust and arrogance. So today I want you to think about maybe there's somebody that you know that God is blessed with a gift. And they're wasting it. God has blessed them and they're wasting their gift. You know, maybe it's because of a lack of self-control. Maybe it's pride, who knows? But they're not using the gift as God designed it. Because such stories, if you're a Christian and a believer, they break your heart to see such a waste taking place. So like I said, Samson's story begins in chapter 13 of the book of Judges. So if you turn to chapter 13, we're going to begin just reading the first 4 verses just to get the background for the story. I'll wait for everybody to get to chapter 13. 16. Okay. Judges chapter 13. Everybody got it with me? Judges chapter 13. It begins, again, the Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight. So the Lord handed them over to the Philistines, who oppressed them for 40 years. Now in those days, a man named Manoah from the tribe of Dan lived in the town of Zorah. And his wife was unable to become pregnant, and they had no children. And the angel of the Lord appeared appeared to Manoah's wife and said, "Even though you have been unable to have children, you will soon become pregnant and give birth to a son. So be careful. You must not drink wine or any alcoholic drinks, nor eat any forbidden food, and you will become pregnant and give birth to a son. And his hair must never be cut, for he will be dedicated to God as a Nazirite from birth. He will begin to rescue Israel from the Philistines." So in these first few verses of the story of Samson, we see that Israel once again continues to disobey God, and God has allowed the Philistines to conquer them and rule over their lands once again. And we see another story of a husband and a wife unable to have children, unable to conceive children, and God has blessed them with a child. And we see another example of God providing a deliverer. He has plans to bring his children back to him again. From the creation of time, he's had it all laid out, all planned out, who he's going to put at a particular place at a particular time to serve his will.
Amen.
And it says that Samson was to be raised as a Nazirite. That means he's dedicated to serve God from his birth. That meant he couldn't drink wine. He's not supposed to play with corpses or go into graveyards. He's not supposed to cut his hair. And in chapter 13, we do not read very much about the younger years of Samson. But when he gets to be about 20, we start learning about Samson. And we find that he's a proverbial rebel. Doesn't like to do what God has called him to do. His strength was a gift of God, and when the Spirit of the Lord would come on Samson, he would acquire supernatural strength. And that strength was designed and created and intended for Samson to deliver Israel from the Philistines, using nothing but his hands. Now, when we read the story of Samson, we find out that as a young man, he had a very strong sexual appetite. And he lusted for Philistine women. Not for the women in his own tribe, not for the Israelites, but for the Philistine women, the women that he was supposed to be avoiding, the women that he was created to be a deliverer for the people of Israelite, the women that was from the nation that put Israel in bondage. These were the women that he lusted for. And if you read the Bible, one of the things we just read is that God does not like for us to be associating or marrying unbelievers. It was a sin. It was against God's will to marry someone that was not a believer. And he is supposed to be a Nazirite, lusting for people that comes against his vow as a Nazirite. So Samson is looking for love in all the wrong places. And we can see an example of this when we jump to chapter 14. Seems like right at the very beginning of chapter 14, we can get right into it. So let me read that to you. It says, "One day, when Samson was in Timnah, one of the Philistine women caught his eye. When he returned home, he told his father and mother, 'A young Philistine woman in Timnah caught my eye. I want to marry her. Get her for me.' So she was attractive. There's nothing there about love. It's all about lust. It's like she was property. Mom, Dad, get her for me. It's like a new toy. Put her in my toy box. But in verse 3 we read, his father and mother objected. Isn't there even one woman in our tribe or among the Israelites you can marry? Why must you go to the pagan Philistines to find a wife? A spoiled little Samson said, get her for me. She looks good to me. His father and mother didn't realize that the Lord was at work in this, creating an opportunity to work against the Philistines who ruled over the land at that time. So to make a long story short, Samson goes and marries this woman. And the weddings were like 7-day affairs. So they go on for days and days. And at the beginning of the 7-day period, Samson's all cocky and thinks he's smarter than everybody else. He shares a riddle with the 30 Philistine groomsmen that he did not think that they could figure out. So he shares this riddle and he places a bet that they cannot solve the problem. They cannot solve the riddle. And the bet was for a set of clothes. So I guess Samson figures, I'm a newlywed, I need a new wardrobe. So I'm going to bet these 30 groomsmen that they can't figure out the riddle. And if they can't figure it out, I've got 30 new sets of clothes. But if I lose, I've got to pay them 30 sets of clothes. Well, the first few days, the groomsmen, they could not figure out the riddle, and they're getting mad and they're getting angry. And remember, they're Philistines. So they're ruthless and they're barbaric. And they're getting really mad and frustrated, so they go to this new wife of Samson, and they tell her that if you do not give us the answer to this riddle, we are going to burn your house down. We're going to burn you and your father alive. Well, that's a little bit of motivation to try to find this answer to the riddle. So Samson is approached by his new wife, new bride, and she says, if you love me, you'll give me the answer to the riddle. He doesn't do it right away, so she continues to nag him. Please, if you love me, you're going to give me the answer to the riddle. And after a few days of nagging, Samson finally submits and he tells her the answer. And she gives the answer to the groomsmen, which allowed the groomsmen to win the bet. Now Samson owes them 30 sets of clothing. And he's mad. He's angry. He's betrayed. So he leaves his wife and he's angry at her. And he seeks to carry out his vengeance upon these ruthless Philistines. So we'll pick up our story at verse 19. So he's mad. It says, then the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. He went down to the town of Ashkelon, and he killed 30 men. He took their belongings, and he gave their clothing to the men who had solved his riddle. But Samson was furious about what had happened, and he went back home, and he left his wife, and he went back home to live with his father and mother. So his wife, left at the altar, was given in marriage to the man who had been Samson's best man at the wedding. So killing 30 Philistines makes the Philistines mad also. They're angry. They also want revenge and vengeance against Samson. Samson's elevated to the top of their most wanted list. They want to kill him. Now, most people think that if you watch the movies, that Samson is this great big hulk of a man, kind of like the Hulk, with a massive chest and big bulging arms and big thighs and legs. But in all reality, he was probably just a normal guy, just like me or you. Just a typical guy. You know, Jewish guys are probably about 5'8", 120, 130 pounds, not very big. Because if he was a great big massive guy, a Goliath of a guy, you know, they would give him all the glory and all the credit for his strength. But if he's a little guy and he's able to do this miraculous feats with his strength, God gets all the glory. And you got to remember that the Israelites didn't have an army. They didn't have an army right now to deliver themselves from the Philistines. So God gave the Israelites one man, Samson, one man to deliver his nation from the Philistines. Now, isn't that just the way God does things? He doesn't do it the way you would do it, putting together 10,000 man army. He puts one little scrawny Jewish guy out in the front and puts the Spirit of the Lord upon him. So Samson's ability to carry out why he was created was all based upon his strength. It was not based upon his reasoning ability, as we will soon see. At the beginning of chapter 15, we see that Samson's sexual desires are flaring up again. So chapter 15, if you can turn to it real quick, it says, later on, during the wheat harvest, Samson took a young goat as a present to his old wife, who he had left. So he brings the goat to the house and he says to her father, I'm going into my wife's room to sleep with her. But her father wouldn't let him. Her father says, truly, I thought you must hate her. So I gave her in marriage to your best man. But look, her younger sister is even more beautiful than she. You know, marry her instead. Well, Samson gets mad again. He says, this time I cannot be blamed for everything I am going to do to the Philistines. So it's not Samson. He puts all the blame on the Philistines on what's going on in his life. He doesn't take responsibility for anything. It's always somebody else's fault. And you also see in this story that Samson is never using the strength that God had given him to deliver Israel from the Philistines. He's always using this strength to get something that stands in his way out of his way, or if somebody has offended him, or somebody has ticked him off, then all of a sudden he gets angry and vengeful and he uses his strength. So all of his actions are selfish, personal. Let's continue reading verse 4. This is what I said. You're not going to believe it unless you read it. Then he went out and caught 300 foxes, and he tied their tails together in pairs. And he fastened a torch to each pair of tails. And then he lit the torches, and he let the foxes run through the grain fields of the Philistines. He burned all their grain to the ground, including the sheaves and the uncut grain. He also destroyed their vineyards and their olive groves. Well, this is a miraculous feat all in itself. I don't know if you've ever tried this, but try to just get 2 domesticated puppy dogs and try to tie their tails together. Or try to get 2 cats and try to tie their tails together. Samson goes out and gets 300 wild foxes, ties their tails together, and sets them loose in the grain fields at harvest time. So single-handedly, Samson destroyed their food supply for the rest of the year.
Wow. Yeah, really bad.
And as you can imagine, the Philistines are angry. They're ticked off. Verse 6, who did this? The Philistines demanded. Samson, was the reply, because his father-in-law from Timnah gave Samson's wife to be married to his best man. So the Philistines went and got the woman and her father and burned them to death. As you can see, the Philistines are very savage, very wicked, very cruel, very ruthless people. And they burned to death this woman and her father. This poor woman, no matter what she does, she's going to end up being burned to death by the Philistines. They tried to do it at her marriage. And now they finally did it to her. Verse 7 says, because you did this is Samson, killing his wife, I won't rest until I take my revenge on you. Now God's going to get deliverance from the Philistines one way or another. He's using Samson's weakness to flare up his anger to destroy the Philistines and create fear in them. So he attacked the Philistines with great fury and killed many of them. So after he's killed many of them, he went to live in a cave in the rock of Etam, because now he's afraid. The Philistines retaliated by setting up camp in Judah. So they went to Judah and they spread out near the town of Lehi. So the Philistines have now gone into Judah and they're beginning to torment the Israelites, killing them and just raiding them, maybe burning down their houses. It doesn't really say, but it says, then the men of Judah asked the Philistines, why are you attacking us? The Philistines replied, we've come to capture Samson. We've come to pay him back for what he did to us. So, you do something to me, I'm going to do something to you. Well, the Israelites of Judah, they got 3,000 men together and they went down to get Samson at the cave at the rock of Etam. So they sent 3,000 men to capture one of their own, Samson. And they said to Samson, don't you realize the Philistines rule over us? What are you doing to us? Why are you going crazy like this all the time? We're the ones that are suffering. But Samson replied, I only did to them what they did to me. Isn't that kind of what we do, especially when we're children? They did it first. He did it to me first. It's their fault. It's not my fault. So the men of Judah told him, we have come to tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines. All right, Samson said, but promise that you won't kill me yourselves. No, we will only tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines. We won't kill you. So they tied him up with 2 brand new ropes, and they brought him up from the rock. So as Samson arrived at Lehi, all the Philistines they were coming out, and they're all shouting in triumph because they've captured Samson. But the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon Samson, and he snapped the ropes on his arms as if they were burnt strands of flax, and they fell from his wrist. Then he found the jawbone of a recently killed donkey, and he picked it up, and he killed 1,000 Philistines with it. So one man single-handedly killed 1,000 Philistines. So you got to imagine Samson's kind of becoming like a Goliath to the Philistines. They can't kill him. They can't capture him. They're living in a fear of him. They don't even want to see him coming near them because the Spirit of the Lord may come upon him. Well, in chapter 16 of Judges, This is the final chapter. It describes that his sexual desires are all ablaze again. Samson is looking for love in all the wrong places. And we read, first of all, about him going to Gaza and spending the night with a Philistine prostitute. We're not going to go into that story, because the undoing of Samson was his crazy love affair with Delilah. Delilah, a beautiful Philistine woman named Delilah. So turn with me to chapter 16 of Judges. You've got to read this along with me. You're not going to believe this story. Verse 4. Sometime later, this is about 20 years later, so he's about 40 now, Samson fell in love with a beautiful woman named Delilah, who lived in the valley of Sorek. The rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, "Entice Samson to tell you what makes him so strong and how he can be overpowered and tied up securely. Then each of us will give you 1,100 pieces of silver." There are 7 rulers in the Philistine area right then, in that region. 7 rulers. So each one of them are going to give her 1,100 pieces of silver. So it's been 20 years. And all this time, the Philistines have been living in fear of Samson. You know, they don't want to approach him, but they want to know where he is, what he's doing, who he's with, and they know that he's suddenly attracted to the beautiful Delilah. And they had really good reason to be afraid of him. But they also knew that his strength was not due to his size. They can't explain why he becomes so strong. Where does the strength come from? And what can we do to subdue him, and to tie him up, take him into bondage? So they enticed Delilah with silver, seeking her help and discovering the secret to Samson's mighty strength. So Delilah says to Samson, please tell me what makes you so strong, and what it would take to tie you up securely. Well, guys, if a woman ever asks you what makes you strong and what can I do to tie you up, don't answer her. So either Samson thinks he's invincible, or he's one French fry short of a Happy Meal. He's naive. Verse 7, Samson replied, "If I were tied up with 7 new bowstrings that have not yet been dried, I would become as weak as anyone else." So the Philistine rulers brought Delilah 7 new bowstrings and tied Samson up with them. UPS, we have 7 green whips for a Mrs. Delilah. Now you would think that Samson would realize that, hey, something is wrong here. You know, maybe, just maybe, Delilah isn't playing some kind of kinky games with me. Maybe she really doesn't love me. And she had hidden some men in the inner rooms of her house. And Delilah cried out,
"Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you."
but Samson snapped the bowstrings as a piece of string snaps when it is burned by fire. So the secret of the strength was not discovered. Now it doesn't say, but I'm sure that all the Philistines, when they saw Samson break those ropes, they probably dived out of every open window, any door that they could find. So Delilah had hidden a bunch of men in another room in her house. And you would think that all of this time during this lovemaking, that Samson would have heard something. You know, maybe some people walking around or somebody coughing or sneezing. But Samson's just totally ignorant of what's going on in the other room. Totally clueless. Afterwards, Delilah said to him, "You've been making fun of me and telling me lies. Now please tell me how you can be tied up securely." So Delilah is caught in the act in her attempt to tie up Samson, to take away his strength, yet she turns things around and she puts all the blame on Samson, you know, for mocking her and for telling her lies. So Delilah must have been some kind of dominatrix or something. I am not really sure. She scolds Samson and tells him to quit lying to her and tell me, how can I tie you up? Guys, don't tell her. You know, Samson was not the brightest color in the crayon box here. Samson replied, "If I were tied up with brand new ropes that had never been used, I would become as weak as anyone else." UPS, I need a Miss Delilah to sign for some new ropes. The UPS stands for United Philistine Services. So Delilah took the new ropes and he tied him up with them. Now does Samson say, "Hey, where do you keep getting all these ropes? Who's delivering all this stuff? And why are there men always in the other room?" He doesn't say any of that stuff. Well, the men were hiding in the inner room as before, and then, and again, Delilah cried out,
"Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you."
But again, Samson snapped the ropes from his arms as if they were thread. Does Samson get mad? No, Delilah gets mad. And then Delilah says, "You've been making fun of me and telling me lies. Now tell me, how can you be tied up securely?" As you can see, sex and love can be a very powerful temptress. But it's all a game to Samson, and he feels that he can tell her another lie. So Samson replied, "If you were to weave the 7 braids of my hair into the fabric of your loom and tighten it with the loom shuttle, I would become as weak as anyone else." So while he slept, Delilah wove the 7 braids of her hair into fabric. His hair. Now there's nothing in the book of Judges that even suggests that Samson's mother dropped him on his head while he was a baby. But at nowhere does it also say that Samson said, "This woman must be crazy. She's tying me up again." So then she tightened the 7 braids with the loom shuttle, and again Delilah cried out,
"Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you."
But Samson woke up, pulled back the loom shuttle, and yanked his hair away from the loom and from the fabric. Poor Samson. All he wants is to have this woman love him. And you would think that the great big Samson would be afraid of this woman by now. Why is he still with her? Why is he playing with fire? But the sexual temptation has blinded him, and he thinks he can get away with it before he's caught. He thinks he can get away with the sex before he runs into trouble. And that's when Delilah pulls out the big guns. And then Delilah pouted. How can you tell me I love you when you don't share your secrets with me? You've made fun of me 3 times now. I'm sure she's crying. And you still haven't told me what makes you so strong. And she tormented him with her nagging day after day until he was sick to death of it. And finally, Samson shared his secret with her. My hair has never been cut. For I was dedicated to God as a Nazirite from birth. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as anyone else. So temptation wore Samson down. He was there for sinful pleasure, a taboo sexual relationship with a beautiful, desirous Philistine woman, Delilah. UPS, we have an express delivery for a Miss Delilah. So Delilah realized that he had finally told her the truth. So she sent for the Philistine rulers and said, "Come back one more time, for he has finally told me his secret." So the Philistine rulers returned with the money in their hands, and Delilah lulled Samson to sleep with his head in her lap. And then she called in a man to shave off his 7 locks. See it up there. And this way he began to bring him down, and his strength left him. See, Samson had defiled God's love. He had defiled his Nazirite vow. And he must have been a really hard sleeper, because Delilah was able to do things to his hair 4 separate times, each time resulting in him being tied up and Philistines rushing into the bedchamber. And then Delilah cried out,
Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you.
and when he woke up, he thought, I will do just as I've done in the past and shake myself free. But he didn't realize that the Lord had left him. So the Philistines captured him and gouged out his eyes. They took him to Gaza, where he was bound with bronze chains and forced to grind grain in the prison. But before long, his hair began to grow back. That'll lead us into the sequel. We're not going to go there. It was the Spirit of the Lord that gave Samson his strength. It's the Spirit of the Lord that gives you your strength.
Amen.
It's the Spirit of the Lord that gives you your power. It's the Spirit of the Lord that gives you the authority to act in His name. Samson had always acted by faith, knowing that the Spirit of the Lord was upon him. And he had always acted as he had done in the past, because the Spirit of the Lord was upon him.